1, and we are live. Hello, everybody. I am Tito Labine, and this is Tito Time. Again, this is a new segment kind of that we're starting, getting to know our guests a little bit more one-on-one interaction, nothing too crazy, nothing too, out of the ordinary, whatever they're, down for, whatever they're, willing to share and talk about, it's what we're going to do. Joining me today is not only the voice of Champ Offroad, but also one of the voices of the AMA Supercross series. We have Haley Shanley.
Thanks, Tito. It's so good to be here. It's great to see your face. It feels like it has been way too long since I've seen you guys.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. We wanted to go to Indy last weekend, and it was one of those where I think when Snowcross started, Kitzman reached out to Jeffrey and Lau and were like, "Hey, I need your help with like this weekend and then this weekend." And I didn't know if we even knew what the Supercross schedule was, but I knew we went last year. I knew we want to go to Indy again. And so we wanted to do both. And then as time got closer, we realized like, oh man, like the ERX weekend was going to land on Indy, and they had already obviously agreed to go do some work in Elk River. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go to Indy by myself. So I decided to make an appearance at ERX. I love going there for the snowcross races. And I know that you were there last year. And I don't know if you saw or not, but I brought the wig back. I brought a different wig back and got just as rowdy as last year. So.
God, that's what I love to hear. We did miss you at Indy, though, and I know Josh Greco missed his cheering section, too, or part of his cheering section.
Man. Dude, every time, man, like we've honestly almost like low key turned into Josh Greco fans, like because of that whole like fun interaction thing. It was just so funny, like for him to really give those props. You're like, well, I mean, I think you're picking with your heart on this one. And yeah. So that's always stuck with us. And now it kind of turned into a little bit of a running joke, but now it's like, now we really do wish nothing but the best for him and want him to be there.
He's awesome. He has a good story, and props to Daniel Blair for throwing that down in our Rocky Mountain picks. And I think it was Atlanta 2 years ago. Yeah. So Josh Greco has such a good story and such a good dude. But no, we missed you guys last weekend in Indy, and I didn't realize it was an overlap weekend until just before last weekend. It was like Thursday or I don't know, it was like Wednesday or Thursday. And I was bummed because I know there was a few off-road people there, which was awesome. But last year we saw a lot of my snowcross friends there because there was no racing going on that weekend. I can't remember if it was rescheduled or what happened, but at any rate, we'll have to get you to another one.
Yeah. Like I said, it was one of those just weird things where I think last year it was snowcross and then, or it was supercross and then snowcross. But obviously, like you said, as they run different weekends, or, as a situation here where you guys have the off week and, I think ERX kind of fell on that time frame. So bummer. I love Indianapolis. I love Lucas Oil Stadium. I mean, I've been there for everything but a Colts game at this point. I've been there for the Big Ten championship game, for Supercross, for PRI. And what's funny is the first time I actually got to enjoy some of their food was at Supercross last year. And I don't know what it was. And I don't know if you can speak on this, but the hot dogs that they have at Lucas Oil Stadium are by far top tier. Really? The best hot dogs. Yeah, I've had in any stadium. I don't know. It's so reminiscent of, in your childhood and you're like, man, these hot dogs are just the best things ever. That's what it yes. like reminded me of and tasted. It was like I was a kid again. It's like I was 9.
What makes a superior dog aside from the nostalgia? Is it just like baseline hot dog, or is there some frills to it? Like, what makes Lucas Oil Stadium's top tier?
And this is gonna rile Jeffrey up, but Jeffrey is a big fan of like the skin hot dogs. So when you take a bite and it's like a crunch and you gotta like fight for like every bite. Like that's the hot dogs that he likes. And I like just the regular, like Oscar Franks, you know what I mean? No fight. You just take a bite. It comes undone. And I think with these ones, I don't know. I don't know if they're just big ballpark Franks, but they weren't stingy, man. Because sometimes you get some hot dogs that are like little, little beef sticks. You know what I mean? Little
Yeah.
Slim Jims, and it's just all bread. These ones were nice, giving hot dogs. And man, I don't know, and I don't know if it's just how they make them or what. But these were, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just the native in me, but I think it was a boiled hot dog, and I'm all down for that.
I too am a fan of the boiled hot dogs, not the skin hot dogs. And I'll be honest, I've never heard that before. But that's quite fitting if I'm tracking your description of the skin hot dogs.
Yeah, dude. Even so, Lyle is not a big eater. Like he'll maybe eat once a day, and he's a chicken tendies, mac and cheese kind of guy. And man, I've never seen him eat this much. I think so. I had four hot dogs. I had about four hot dogs, and then I remember I was like, man, I'm gonna sound big here. I'm like, but I could go for another one. And Lyle had two at this point, and he looks at me, and he's like, you gonna get another one? I was like, I don't know. I'm like, you want to split one? He's like, yeah. So dude, for Lyle to crush 2.5 hot dogs is pretty big stuff, man. It's like Greco making the mains, you know what I mean? Where it's just kind of unheard of.
Yeah, it speaks volumes.
But no, I mean, like Indy is a great time. When it comes to, Indianapolis, that's essentially, a hometown race for you. And, actually within the past year, you've gotten opportunities to, be at Ironman and Indy. So for you, what has kind of been, do you have a preference on either? And I'm talking the specific event itself, because I have my own little gripe with like one of them. Both were great races, man. They were cool to go to, fun to watch. But for you, obviously Supercross versus, an outdoor national, what's your favorite as far as those two events go?
They're so different. It honestly, like, this is the non-exciting answer, but it's like when people ask me, what do you prefer, snowcross or off-road? Like, two very different things, and it's all about the experience that you're going for. Like, the stadium experience of Supercross and the pyro, the music, the video, everything about in stadium racing and the kind of racing it produces is a really special experience. That said, like, the all-out speed and aggression, and like as far as the racing goes, it in an outdoor national is unmatched. And an outdoor national is where, like, is how would I describe it? It's like the tailgating experience. You're out there in the sun, you're out there in the elements, you got a drink in your hand. It's a whole different experience. So if I had to pick one or the other, I don't know that I could do that even at gunpoint. Like, they're both so good. And
Yeah.
especially too, like, I've had a chance to experience all the current venues with Supercross, and I've been to many of the outdoor national tracks. Not all. I'm working on checking off a few more this summer. And even there's so much variance in terms of, the experience is great at all the outdoor nationals, but you're really getting such a different experience at each of the tracks. And I think that's similar for short course off road. So you really got to get out and experience as many as you can, because each venue has so much to offer. So it all just depends what you're in the mood for, I would say. If you got to choose between outdoors or pro motocross, I should say, or supercross race, because they're both so much fun.
And I get what you mean by that. And I think for someone like you, I'm sure it's easy. It's more difficult to think about which are the other. For someone like me, that I sweat in 40-degree weather, so the Ironman was a little was a little hot this year. So
It was
that was
spicy.
it was brutal, man. I remember we went, and I'm like. I wasn't even sure if I could have, like, a beer or a cocktail or anything else like that. And I don't think I did, because it was just so warm, so hot, that I was like, man, I can just
Mhm.
water, Gatorade, whatever it may be. Obviously with it being our first time there too. I didn't know that you could bring in like coolers and stuff.
Mhm.
So I'm like, man, next time I might have to get a little rowdy. Might have to get a little rowdy. Yeah. Post up on the hillside. But
There you go. And this was
Dude,
your first ever outdoor national Ironman was.
yeah. So,
Oh man.
um, I the truth is so I enjoyed like MX versus ATV Unleashed, video games
Mhm.
like that. I
Hell
loved
yeah.
doing it, but and I liked Tony Hawk, right? I loved the skateboarding. But my
Mhm.
big ass couldn't get on a skateboard. Like I couldn't get on a dirt bike, right? I'm right, big poser stuff. Like I enjoyed watching it. I think it's cool, but I couldn't do any of that. So I never felt like it was right for me to like get into that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So as far as like really deeply getting into it, I think within the past probably 3 years since I really started working with Jeffrey and Lyle, is when I really started getting into like Supercross, motocross, the outdoor national stuff like that. And like
Mhm.
I knew of like Chad Reed and Jeremy McGrath, Ricky Carmichael, guys like that, Bubba Stewart. Like of course I knew names like that, but it comes down to like the stuff that we're talking about and into now. Like there's no shot. I mean, so yeah, Ironman was my first outdoor national. Indy was my first Supercross. So I mean, Indiana, you know what I mean, holding it down.
Racing capital of the world is in our backyard here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's so much going on here, which is so rad that you get to come to PRI too, where all these different worlds converge, and it's there's a lot to experience here. We got to get you to the Indy 500 next.
Don't even play, man, because when I played NASCAR,
Mhm.
my favorite track was was Indianapolis, just because of the square like body of it. Like I always felt it was more fun to play that than
Yeah.
just some oval or some kind of triangle ish track. So Indy was my favorite, and it's so funny. Like I said, is you would never think Indianapolis, as far as like you said, the kind of the capital of like motorsports, but then when you really start to think about it, you're like, man, like Indiana really does hold down a lot of spots.
Yeah, between the Brickyard with NASCAR, IndyCar, Indy 500, Supercross, outdoor motocross, NHRA is huge here, and of course dirt track racing. And I know there's a bunch of industries as well that service the off-road industry that are located here. So it's a culture that it is racing culture here in Indianapolis, and that's like I knew of that before I moved here, but getting to be here and really experience that and see like in the month of May, it's like people decorate like they do for Christmas, and there's checkered flags in everyone's front yard, and it's just
Oh,
such
that's
a part
cool.
of the culture here, which is really rad.
Oh, dude, and that's I think that's what's great is like that embracing of the racing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
When it comes to Indiana, Indianapolis, and whatnot. I mean, because 3 years ago, even further back, I mean, you don't really think of Indiana or Indianapolis as like a really a destination place to go. But like you said, the more that you're around it, the more you're there. You're like, man, this is honestly probably an underappreciated city as far as it goes. It's got no body of water or stuff like that. But man, I love going to Indianapolis. Each
Mhm.
time we go, we were just talking about it. Like if we went to Indy for Supercross, Jeffrey's like, he's like, I would have tried to get a reservation at St. Elmo's, and we would have ate it up, man. St. Elmo's is a must place stop when you go to Indy.
I am. I don't even know if I should say this. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it. I haven't been to St. Elmo's.
What?
Everyone talks
Really?
about it, and even this last weekend, the racers are talking about they have their favorite steakhouse in town, and I know they're talking about St. Elmo's. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not even gonna pretend like I've been there. I should have tried it by now because everyone who doesn't live here says it's like a destination. And I say that I don't have a lot of friends in town here, so it's not like I'm talking to locals who hype it up. I'm sure that they
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
but everyone from around talks about St. Elmo, so I'm sure it's legit.
No, it's great. I mean, so Bryant Lambert
Mm-hmm.
was the one gracious enough to be able to take us there, and I guess St. Elmo's is known for their shrimp cocktail and shrimp cocktail sauce, and it's so funny because it's like you wouldn't think it's somewhere in the middle of USA it would be so known for their shrimp and the shrimp cocktail sauce, and I took a big scoop. He's like, yeah, you got to take a big scoop, man. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I take this big scoop and bite, and my nose immediately like flares up, and my eyes start watering. It's so spicy. I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, what is in that? And as it kind of settles in, I'm like, is that I'm like, is that horseradish? And he's like, yeah, that's what they're known for. I'm like, you son of a bitch, man. Like he knew how spicy the cocktail sauce was, but he wanted me to be like, he was like, yeah, man, take a big bite. So
Once you
so
get the full experience.
yeah, if you ever go, go ahead and take a big bite of the cocktail sauce, and opens up the taste buds.
Yeah, clear out the sinuses.
100%. So when it comes to Supercross again, we just got done comparing Supercross and motocross, outdoor national versus the stadiums. With I guess we haven't even really given people I don't want to say like an explanation or kind of like a lead up to where you're at, because I mean, we champion you as much as we can. Where you're at right now is so well earned, so hard earned. You've always been prepared. You always are writing down, every little note you can think of. And I know when you got game face on. I know when you're in your mode where you're just like trying to remember stuff, you're trying to get it to the forefront of your brain, because there's so much stats and statistics on what you want to get right. And so for you to be where you're at, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to like degrade it or, minimize it. We're not surprised, because you are great at what you do. So for you to be where you're at, I mean, is awesome. I guess for some of the people out there, who do see you, on the weekends and Champ Offroad, I'm sure they'd like to know, how did this opportunity present itself? How did you get to where you're at? What doors opened up? Did you kick doors down? Did you, throw a Molotov cocktail in the house and they came running out and you're like, oh, hey, by the way, kind of what was your strategy, about going about it? I know obviously you're super passionate about it, but, kind of how did you get, from being, a Rush reporter to AMA?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. You guys have been, I mean, we go back since like, I want to say like when I first started working for the venues as an announcer pre 2020, like 2018, 2019, is when I got acquainted with you guys, and you guys have always been so supportive of me and welcoming me onto your documentary series and so much more, and just being in my corner. So I appreciate you guys so much. And the boost, how I got here, it was many years of kicking down doors and boundaries, and because where I'm at as a commentator was where I always wanted to be. It doesn't happen overnight. You certainly don't just get handed a microphone in the broadcast industry. You have to earn it, which is a really strange thing, because like, how can you earn it if you don't even get a shot? So you have to carve out opportunities for yourself. And through my intention before I even set out on this journey is I'm going to learn all I can about broadcast, about all facets of the media, so that I can not only have those skills that could serve me well one day, but to learn as much as I can about the subjects that I'm involved in, be it off-road, be it snowcross, any sport that I'm working in that I'm very much passionate about already, but also to build really meaningful connections along the way, because you could have all the skills in the world, you could have the best resume in the world, but if you're not out there like networking, creating content for your demo reel to ultimately send to potential employers, you're really not going to move forward. So it's been many years of keeping that vision of like, where do I want to be? And snowcross was my first opportunity. I'd worked a lot in dirt track racing, specifically sprint cars, and both as a producer as well as a commentator. Snowcross as well, that was really big for me. Got my first break as a reporter in snowcross, and actually pro watercross just before that. Ultimately got to the booth in snowcross as both a color commentator and then play-by-play. And meanwhile, during that off season for snowcross was short course racing, and that came about from my experience in working for a race team in a racetrack, and so I had been a fan of it for a long time. But when the opportunity came about to be a commentator for it, I was like, I already started to picture that. I'm like, what if? And somehow the stars kind of aligned for it in 2019. Each of the tracks were doing their own broadcast packages, and ERX, Chris Carlson and the team were the first ones to approach me. And then Courtney, who was working for Bark River at the time, she approached me. So it was working with those two venues before Champ Offroad started that got my foot in the door and working on the broadcast side of it. And it was so much fun. That first year working with the venues and just kind of getting into what the flow of show is like. And then of course been with Champ Offroad since they started. So it's been I've been at this now since 2017 is when I got my first opportunity to do an interview. And it was many years of just always picking up the phone, always saying yes to opportunities, knowing that one day that phone's going to stop ringing. And you also need to keep diversifying your portfolio, because if you're just going to stay in one lane, you might not be growing as much as you're capable of. So I've been diversifying, and I think I've kind of meandered from the path of the question that you asked me. I apologize, Tito, but how Supercross came about was it was actually in 2021 actually. They had approached me. They had found me actually on social media, and my boss now sent me a DM. And at first, I'm like, okay, I don't know this person. It went to like my general folder, I'm pretty sure. So I was already like, I don't know what to think here. It could be anyone. It could be a scam, phishing. And I'm like immediately like, okay, my heart rate hadn't really spiked yet, but I'm like, okay, well, I'll just respond very carefully and see what this person says. And she goes, yeah, this is my role with Felt Entertainment. We're currently, hiring for this position, and we like what we see. Would you be willing to submit a demo reel in your resume? I'm like, absolutely. So that very night, I edited a fresh demo reel, sent it off with a resume, got an audition, and ultimately at that point, the timeline here was about October, November. At that point, I was already committed to Snowcross, so I was like, hey, I have these amount of dates from your schedule that I can do. I want to be here. Don't get me wrong, but I've committed to Snowcross. And they're like, we understand. And ultimately, they went another direction with another really great talent for that year. And then the very next year, they're like, hey, the position is still full, but we want to build a bench. Would you want to audition again? And I'm like, sure. So Supercross is not going to come a knocking more than maybe more than once, let alone more than twice. So, and that would have been the fall of 2022. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I impressed them. They're serious. We've been talking kind of on and off throughout the year. I need to potentially be prepared to make a really tough decision of go all in with Supercross. And that's what I did. I ended up getting the position, was offered the full schedule, but was already still kind of committed at that point because the conversation had gotten drawn out to the winter. So ended up doing a almost full schedule with Supercross 2023, also balancing Snowcross, and then last year was completely all in with them, and same with this year. So I'm not working with that side of long haul productions anymore. On the Snowcross side, I'm just working on Champ Offroad with them. So it's short story long. That's kind of the road to how I got to where I am with Supercross, and been with Champ, like I said, since 2020 when they opened their gates.
Yeah, that's perfect. Honestly, I don't know if we had ever really gotten like a full like breakdown, you know what I mean, of kind of your journey and your path as far as you go. I remember, I think this thing's moving. Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
All good.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, no, I feel like we haven't really gotten that opportunity to get a good breakdown. You know what I mean, of your path, of your journey. So to see, it's starting, like you said, essentially kind of feels like back in 2017, and we fast forward now, it's 2025. Do you ever kind of look back and you're like, oh man, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you never would have imagined like where you're at, what you're doing? Like, has that ever happened to you? And if it has, how often does it happen?
It happens quite a bit. I'm always thinking, like, if I have a game face on, I'm either focusing on what's next, or really stressed thinking about like the next minute of the show and what's expected, or coming up with something to talk about, or I'm deep in thought reflecting, because I'm a big reflector. And so yes and no. In growing up, I had in high school when I got my first opportunity to learn how to shoot and edit, and I saw a career pathway of where I could go with my newly found skills of like producing news and reporting, and we had a full broadcast set up at my high school in St. Michael, Minnesota. And so that's where I first got a taste of like, I can do something. I can blend my passion with a career path now and apply these skills to, talk about motorsports, which is what I've always loved. So I've always seen myself being able to be a commentator, yet somewhere along the way, especially before I was handed a mic for the first time, I'm like, you know what, if it's not in the cards for me and it's not happening, I'm really satisfied with my career as a producer and director and working in multimedia and digital. And I'm like, this is all right. Now in hindsight, I think I was kind of settling there because why was I not more aggressive about putting my name out there, pursuing other opportunities and whatnot. So like I always saw myself there, but along the way I started to like maybe see something different for myself, even if that's what I always wanted. So it is cliche and corny as it is, like don't give up. Like you are worthy of someone picking up the phone for you. You're worthy of getting that yes. You have to accept some rejection along the way. You're going to have to fail a bunch in order to learn. Like if you look back at any minutes of mine on any broadcast, you can surely find any mistakes, any fumbles I've made along the way, and you learn from it and you get better. And there are a lot of corners or a lot of like intersections I hit where I just like I felt discouraged so much. So in those messages in my head kind of culminated into a message of like, well, maybe it's not in the cards from you. Maybe you're not worth it. Maybe you weren't cut out for it. And so it was kind of battling those messages over the years. But no, it's I reflect on it a lot, and I'm really proud that I stuck with it, and I had a lot of people that saw value in me and believed in me along the way.
So where did that kind of come from as far as obviously like you said, very passionate about dirt bikes, very passionate about racing, any sort of competition as far as it goes, finishing first. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's great, it is such I don't want to it sometimes it feels like a niche sport,
Mm-hmm.
racing, just because you've got people who are into sports, play basketball, are about the competition, but do not have like any interest in racing. And racing can be a story in and of itself each time, right? Each year. So for you, where did that passion come from to potentially pursue, like journalism, to be at the forefront, to, be a commentator, a play by play, individual? Like where did that stem from? Because, I think about even like where I'm at right now, where we are at right now, it it wasn't really a passion. It was kind of one of those where like you fall into. I was more passionate about the sport, and then you find out that hey, maybe I'm decent at some things, and you kind of lean into it. But for you, it sounds like you kind of had a good idea about what you wanted to do. So was it something when you were a kid where you like, hey man, I love Bruce Almighty, I want to do something like that, or you know what I mean? Where did that come from?
That's a good question. I just being the short answer is that it's being a fan. And when I was in high school and I got that first opportunity to get my hands on a camera, it was like instantly when I was assigned to go shoot the high school hockey team, or I was I was able to check out a camera to produce any kind of topic I wanted to for this video assignment or for this editorial assignment. And I would choose to go film my friends riding dirt bikes. And it was around that time I got to ride a dirt bike for the first time when I was in high school. And so that was what really got me hooked on the sport as a hardcore fan. And previous to my high school years, like we would watch NASCAR occasionally on Sundays. It's not like we were diehard fans of it, but I grew up in a big sports household, and so like when I got those first opportunities to get up close and personal, and whether it was as a journalist or a photographer, you really get up close and personal access with a sport that you're a fan of, and as a fan, that is so cool. Like who doesn't want to get so close to the rink and have pucks flying at you? Who doesn't want to go talk to the coach and learn more about him or her, or go learn about the players and maybe have a conversation with them? Like that is that is really freaking cool as a fan, and it still is to this day. So it was, you know, I have this natural curiosity where I just like my brain, when I see something, I want to figure out, okay, how does that work? Why is it working that way? Like I want to know all about the pieces. So I think what drew me to storytelling and journalism was that natural curiosity, but B, also just the thrill of being up close and personal with really rad sports, and specifically motorsports.
Yeah, and it's funny too. You bring up, being in Minnesota, being hockey, right? Minnesota's it's the hockey state,
Yeah.
and it just kind of flooded in a bunch of questions for me, because I'll be honest, a lot of the racers that we bring on just are not sports fans. Like they just
Really?
aren't. And it's so weird. Like it's one of those things that I'm not sure of. Like, we interviewed, or we did Tito time with like Ryan Beat, did it with Keegan. Well, Keegan's kind of, he's a fan. I've grown up with him. Somebody like CJ's not a really big like sports fan. You got somebody like Corey Winter who's into like the LA Kings, and that's like about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those where it just doesn't seem like to be the forefront. I mean, and I get it, right? You're trying to be great at your sport. These guys that are there are obviously there for a reason. A lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of talent. So for an opportunity to kind of come back to that is nice for me, because I love sports, man. I'm a big sports guy. I moved from Wisconsin to Minneapolis, and not a big hockey state, Wisconsin. So never really got into it. Never really had a team. And then I got to Minnesota and I got it. I understood it. It was fun. And
Yeah.
now I'm a big, I don't want to say a big, but I'm a Minnesota Wild guy. I got a jersey. I loved going to Wild games. They're so great. So for you, did you ever have a choice, or did it ever have like a conflicting decision between, wanting to pursue something in hockey or wanting to pursue something in racing? Or was it kind of a clear cut path where you're like, hey, I'm getting more opportunities, in this racing industry over this hockey thing?
Yeah, I think for me it was, if I remember correctly, it was always like motorsports, and I think it was because I followed it the closest. Like I grew up in a big sports household. Like my dad played basketball in college, and my sister and brother and I were all involved in athletics. But as far as like me diving in and becoming passionate about one sport, which is funny because it wasn't even like, I'm very passionate about lacrosse. I still play to this day, played college and high school. It didn't really have like a TV presence, so I don't think I got hooked as much as a fan outside of my own playing. But I think like for me, like as a teenager, it was something I dove into so heavily, and that's maybe where I saw for myself like that path, because it's like, oh, what if like this would be cool. It was Aaron Bates at the time was the reporter, and so like I think it was just always that I'm like, you know what, that would be really special. And when I got to college, so I went to South Dakota State, and that's where I graduated from. But I did a few semesters at St. Cloud State to come closer to home, save a little money, and play lacrosse. And the broadcast program there, they made it seem that like you are not going to be successful unless you have an internship with Husky Productions, and unless you don't have a shot in being a commentator if you're not going to go like be a commentator for the hockey team. So like the path was so freaking narrow, and even at that time I didn't have other opportunities. I ended up getting a internship as a camera operator at ERX on Thursday nights, which was, really the first domino to fall in my career in a positive way. So I think like in terms of broadcast opportunities, it seemed like I don't have a shot. It's so saturated, which nowadays I hate it when people say like saturated. I think it's an excuse for a lot of things, but I think at that time that was my impression of it, is like, you know what, I can really diversify myself if I go down this route of motorsports, and specifically motocross and supercross. I have a much bigger passion even at that point, and I have a really big interest in it and a desire to learn more. So if a hockey opportunity ever comes about down the road, sick. But I think for right now, I think I want to go down this route. So I kind of made that decision around early or late teenage years, is when I really started to say like I want to say to myself, I really want to go down the motorsports route in terms of a career as a commentator.
Yeah. No, and hey, like you said, as some of those things kind of make the decisions for you,
Mm-hmm.
or one of those where like, hey, you still can have passion for something else, but if something else comes up, like you said, is with an opportunity, hey, you're camera operator at ERX, and it's like, who would have thought that that'd be, the foot in the door, and going on to stadiums and arenas and stuff. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's so cool. It's so great. It's always one of those where my pops likes to say this, and I like to believe it too. Is people are like, oh, you're lucky. You're lucky, and it's like, okay, well, my dad likes to think that luck is when opportunity crosses paths with preparation. So,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those where, hey, if you get an opportunity and you're prepared, it'll work out. But if you just the opportunity's never there and you're prepared, like of course then you're just not lucky, right? That's the whole
Yeah.
premise of it. But
Yeah.
you can get the opportunities, but if you're not prepared, then you just SOL, right? So
Yeah, and speaking of which, this just triggered a thought for me. Is like I get a lot of mostly young women, but about also a number of young men too, who will send me a message looking for career advice, and you wouldn't believe the amount of people who ask for my advice. I give it to them, and always I start with reach out to if you're looking for motorsports, or it doesn't really matter the sport. Reach out to your local teams, your even like commentating for your high school baseball team. Like it just any opportunity on the mic is a good opportunity. And just the more seat time, the more reps you get, it's only gonna make you better.
100%.
You wouldn't believe the percentage of people that come back to me and be like, you know what, I'm better than that because I've already have experience in this opportunity. And it's like, okay, well, apparently you're too good for other opportunities. And I'm not even sure that story like applies to what we were just talking about, but it's like the you gotta be open to opportunities. No one is too good for any opportunity. Even if you think that like, hey, I'm a really well spoken person, I have a degree, you have this. No, like it's about like being prepared and ready to pivot. And just because like I said, one day that phone's gonna stop ringing.
Yeah, yeah. And was there ever a moment where then you thought like, hey, pretty glad that we're here at Anaheim 1, and you didn't turn professional lacrosse player. So
Mm-hmm.
you know is-
Yes.
so first of all, I think that was cool. I remember meeting you, and then learning that you played like lacrosse, and I'm like, I know probably 3 people in my life who have
Mm-hmm.
like ever even played lacrosse, like seriously, like of course you played in elementary school, and I was terrible at it, right? It's the native game, but man, it just does not translate at all when it comes to that style of play. So learning that you play lacrosse, I think it's cool. And then you continue to play it. So I guess, where is like this like drive, I guess, to and motivation to make time for something like lacrosse, to go around and still hit the track with dirt bikes, and still throw your name in the hat when it comes to some competitions for with dirt bikes.
It is. I tell you what. On some days, it is a crippling case of ADHD. And I say some days it's crippling because I just can't sit still for long. Like I gotta be doing something. And it's not like I have a lot of time on my hands. It's just like I'm on the go with something constantly. And on my days off, that's probably what I'll be doing is going to ride my dirt bike because any of these hobbies for me are so like it's so healing when you spend. I mean, from traveling all season with Offroad and doing snowcross as well. Like it's you gotta take care of yourself and your mind. So to me, like when I can go ride my dirt bike or go play lacrosse, I play once a week in the fall and winter, and then once a week in the summer, and then with moto, like that has not been something that I've planned on in terms of racing. Like it's just so happens that like I'll be going back up home to Minneapolis to see my family, and I'll have the dirt bike with me. And Gary Walton, who media guy Gary Walton, who also owns Border Battle Cross Country, will send me a message and be like, "Hey, we happen to have a race this weekend. How about it?" And I'm like, Can't say no to that. Can't say no to a
Yeah,
track.
yeah.
And then this last year, I'm like, what the heck? There's so many fair races around here. And a fair race, it's not like, I mean, it's exactly what you think it is. It's a little, like, dusty little track built in a rodeo arena. But I'm like, that sounds kind of fun. Like, low risk, like, I'm not going out there to win the thing. I'm probably just going to go out in the vets class. You don't always have a women's class at those, but at any rate, I like the pace of the vets class. That's been purely for fun. I'm a competitive person, but not like, I don't consider myself like a racer by trade, certainly. I do it because I'm a soul rider. It's a chance to ride my dirt bike and have fun. And like how I ended up racing at Redbud this last summer was because Tim Ritchie, the Ritchie family owns and operates Redbud. I was like, hey, you should come try Vet MX. You should come try our grass race. And Redbud just being 2 hours up the road, I'm like, oh, what the heck? I got no excuse. And had the time of my life. So now, I don't know if any of our listeners or you guys had caught last weekend at Daytona. Well, Justin Brayton put me on the spot on our live broadcast on Race Day Live. And what started as a what-if conversation the day prior, we're just chilling before our production meeting. And he's like, hey, RCSX next year, like, what do you think? I'm like, me? Honestly, I've never thought about it. Because like for our work schedule, like we have production meetings during the week. To make it happen would just be like, I'd have to really be supported by Feld Entertainment to make that happen. They'd have to be kind of lenient with me, I think, with like my time commitment that week. But it'd be a really cool opportunity. But I didn't like, it was kind of like, yeah. Then the next day on the broadcast, he throws that on me, and I'm like, you know what? Shoot, maybe this is my chance to like give myself some accountability that I need, because I've actually been wanting to enter a WMX race. Professional women's motocross is back as of last year. They're racing at 6 of the pro nationals, and I'm like, you know what? I've raced with a few women that race them, and they've really encouraged me to sign up and just to be a gate filler, just to see what I did and whatnot. I'm like, you know what? I've already been thinking about it. What the heck? So that was put out there. Ended up getting a really great response from a lot of people who want to help me make it happen with getting a bike down there, getting like just parts and all this stuff. I'm like, whoa, holy shoot! Like this is such a privilege, and it would be a really cool thing to make happen. So, kind of like how my cross country race or my Redbud races, we may be entering a WMX or Ricky Carmichael Supercross next year, just for kicks. So,
and that's what's so cool is like you said, is not necessarily a racer by trade, but you certainly appreciate it, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. You definitely can appreciate it, and you to be in that situation is, you think you're like, man, it couldn't be me, like. You're well aware of, maybe your skills and whatnot. And you're definitely, a person who can wield a dirt bike. Right. I mean, I would never jump on. I'd never do that. You're out of your mind. The closest I got was a Brawford all. And I jumped on a 110 for Jeffrey's birthday. Mm-hmm. And I did it just obviously for his birthday. But like if someone, oh man, actually now that I'm thinking about it, on our podcast last night, somebody brought up, I think it was in chat. Somebody brought up me in a light buggy, and I'm like, no, like in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm like, dude, like don't even waste your time, because, I'm the one to like film it. You know what I mean? I'm the one to talk about it. Like there's no shot. And someone's like, he's like, oh yeah, like would you jump in? And me, of course, I'm just like, yeah, man, like what happens. And somebody was like, oh, $100 for every person you pass, minus 100 if you get past. Mm-hmm. And I'm like I was like, what if I qualify top 3? And just like as like a passing joke, man, I have never heard Lyle laugh that hard before in his life. And I was just kind of like, I called him out on it today. I was like, why'd you laugh so hard, man? Like, like, come on, man. Like, zero faith, dude. Matt Gerald lost his mind. Dylan Parsons, Jeffrey, CJ, dude. They, you get the biggest eye roll. And, it's almost one of those where, like you said, it kind of gets brought up as like a ha-ha, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then there started to be some like people that were like, yeah, at Lena, like at the at the one-off, right? At the one in May, the sportsman race. And so then I really started thinking about it. I'm like, man, I asked Parsons or Gerald, I'm like, what's the horsepower on one of those? Like 75? And he's like 55. I'm like, even worse, man. I'm like, how am I gonna get out of the hellhole if I'm in a light buggy? Like this has got to be an all downhill race. Like there's no shot. So I mean, I don't know. So I might be, following in your footsteps and potentially jumping in, not necessarily a champ sanctioned race, but you know, a race nonetheless at Lena. So I
That is
mean,
awesome.
I mean, like I said,
I love that and I respect the hell out of that, and I hope you get the opportunity to, because that sounds like a lot of fun. And similar to like me and the women I race with, I'm under no impression that I can go and do what they do.
oh yeah,
But like you and I, like as media, like we have a lot of respect for it, and it would be something like I don't want to speak for you, but like that would be such a rad opportunity to be able to do. And I would be there. I'd be right there in the stands cheering for you.
dude. I was like, can we maybe get a 1600 buggy and you put me in with the light buggy class, like something like I need a little bit more horsepower. You know what I mean? There's a lot to be pulling around in there. I'm not a Connor Schultz. You know what I mean? I'm not a Colin or a Taylor roll off. Those guys are just little bitty guys. You know what I mean? You're asking that buggy for a lot, and I don't know if I could do that poor machine. So,
Be sick.
but before we transition into champ, again, with me getting more and more into Supercross, I have a fascination for it and appreciation for it. Especially having now somebody who is a part of that realm. You know what I mean? And I think it's so cool. I think it's great. So far, man, out of your time there, what have been like your favorite stadiums? You know what I mean? What have been some of your favorite stadiums, or even like maybe the track layout? Did the track layout contribute to it, or is it just again, because I know like the atmosphere at A1 is unmatched, right? You
Mm-hmm.
could have a circle track with no jumps at A1 and it would still be hyped. So I guess if A1 is like the atmosphere, the answer, other than A1, what has been like your favorite place to go to, stadium, in Supercross, like specifically?
Ooh, there's so many, because each, whether it's the racing moments that have happened there, and in the track that has lent itself to that, or if it's just the vibe of the stadium. Like you mentioned, A1 is just unmatched. But when we get to go to places like AT&T Stadium in Arlington, where the Cowboys play, like I don't follow football. I don't even know how the game works, but I know that Texas is like the state of football, like Minnesota is the state of hockey. I know how much of a holy place that AT&T Stadium is, and so like for us, like I know that super motocross is mainstream. It's a big deal, but it'll always feel to me like it's, and just because I'm a part of it, it just feels smaller to some of these sports in the same stadiums that we compete in, and we're selling out these same stadiums. So it's like I know realistically I kind of need to break that train of thought. But when we get a race there, like like we've talked about, being a kind of a sports person and growing up in a sports household, like to me that's not lost on me. That vibe is really cool. Seattle's another one that I love. You can see the city skyline from the stadium floor, and just the way that that one is built, the acoustics. It's an outdoor stadium, but that is one of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in. So that, like, for the racers to be able to hear the fans through all of the bike noise and all the pyro and everything, like that's, and for them to comment on it, that's pretty cool. That's a neat environment. I like Detroit. I really love downtown Detroit. Like Detroit gets a bad rap, but I've had nothing but good experiences there. I love the stadium. Would love if we could go back to US Bank in Minneapolis. It was so cool when I got to be there as a fan for the few years they were there. And that's of course a special city to me. But there there are so many. MetLife, which is in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. That one I'm looking forward to as well, because that's another one where like you're flying into NYC and it just feels like such a big city feel. And as a
Yeah.
little Midwesterner, like that just feels big league.
Yeah, I think the last time they were at US Bank was what, 22?
I think so.
Was
Yeah.
that? Because I remember, well, I kind of remember. I was at the Beer Dabbler, just I think at the state fairgrounds,
Okay.
and they have this big like thing there where beer companies all around Minnesota show up and you do these little like beer samplers. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
pay, whatever. I can't remember how much it was, and you get a little cup and you try all these different beers. And I remember I had agreed to it, and I completely even forgot about like the Supercross race. And somebody asked me, and they're like, "Hey, we got a free ticket. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Oh, bro, I'm like, you know, 5 samples in, and like, there's no shot. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
dressed to be outside." And then I think Jeffrey had said too, like there was like a ventilation issue, right? Or I
I think
think
so.
that's why
Yeah.
that they never like went back. So I mean, I hope that they get it figured out, because to this day I've still never been in U.S. Bank. I lived in Minneapolis from 2013 to 2023. Always wanted to go,
Mm-hmm.
but even when the Vikings weren't good and they're playing the Steelers on Thursday night football, tickets were still $200 for the nosebleeds, and I'm like, dude, I'm not trying to spend $200 to watch a team that is a rival of ours. But
Yeah.
it still would be cool to like experience it if it was like a reasonable price. But I'd love to go
Mm-hmm.
back to US Bank. Um, I think in the last probably 3 years, probably one of the best races was uh, the Meadowlands, yeah, and East Rutherford, 2023. I want to say,
Ah, yes.
dude,
Mm-hmm.
probably the best race I've ever seen in the last 5 years, maybe. Only
That was a
because
wild one.
my boy won. That's why.
Max, who won 450s that night? All I remember is Anstey won because that was my pick. It was a showdown.
Yeah,
250 Jet, like I don't know, oh Jet or Hunter, like they were leading. And but anyway, who's your guy?
I believe it was 23. Yeah, right in April. April, right?
Yep.
Yep. It was rainy. It was muddy. My boy, that's his last win. Number 51 of
Oh yes. Okay.
Mr.
He's
Barsha. Bam Bam.
he'll when we ask him about how he feels about mud races, I think it was around might have been before that race we're interviewing me. He's like, I'm a duck. Love the mud, love the water, and he delivers.
I mean, he definitely proved it. I mean, he got a nice little fourth place too in Indy.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch those yet, watch the race back. But I think what I enjoyed about Indy last year and actually going to a Supercross race is, yeah, like it's great to watch it on TV, right? I mean, of course, right? Everyone's trying to watch it, but you actually get to see the progression of like your favorite guy, right?
Yeah.
Is last year Barsha kind of he had a bad start, but he worked his way up to sixth into fifth and started to pick people off. And then I think he bobbled on one of the whoop sections and he lost a lot of time in a position. And then he started gaining time back. And I'm like, man, if you just were consistent, I'm like, it could have been a fourth, maybe a third on just the way that he was pushing and driving and riding. So that's what I enjoy about Supercross being there, especially if you get to see your guy. But if Jet, is way out front, and you're like, all right, like this broadcast is that.
Yeah.
I guess that's a new thing for me and it's something I talked to Jeffrey about, and he kind of helped me be okay with it. Is just some of the domination, you know what I mean? Is it feels very CJ in a pro stock esque kind of race, you know what I mean? And I still
Yeah.
give CJ hell to this day. I mean, last night on the podcast we were talking about it. We were joking around. We were like, "Oh, if you had to get rid of pro class, what would it be?" I was like, "Pro stock." And CJ's like, "Still?" I'm like, "Bro, I'm like, it's so boring, man. When you're out there, I'm like, it's so boring." And I started to feel that way about like Jet. And unfortunately, he had his accident. He had his ACL
Mm-hmm.
injury, and then man, Tomac goes down, and then Hunter, and then Sexton having the year that he is having, man, has just been brutal. But it's like the racing has been so good. Like
Yeah.
for me as like a fan standpoint of like all of it, because it's like you don't know who's gonna win. Like I've been saying it, dude, for years now. Is Jason Anderson's gonna Jason Anderson? You know what I mean? It's just for me, dude. Jeffrey is all about. I'm like no, man, like no way, no shot, man. Jason Anderson's gonna do his thing, right? And then you got Justin Cooper, Cooper Webb. It's you got Bam Bam. I mean, dude, Malcolm Stewart. You know what I mean? It's just so wild, and I enjoy, dude. AP Plessinger is, kind of getting it back together. You know what I mean? It's a rough start, and so I mean, who knows? Next thing you know, Greco's going to be there. I'm telling you, man. If Greco makes a main one time, we need to make this into like a movie. You know what I mean? Where it's all about the never give up attitude, and all he's ever want to do is make one main, and he's going
been
to do it.
making
I'm talking like, you know, he's gonna take ninth one of these times, right? He's gonna edge by, gonna get into the final, and he's gonna be there. So we're hoping.
He's been solid this year, and I was on the verge of texting you guys back last night when we were trying to coordinate a time for this. I was watching his Instagram live with his pet raccoon last night.
Oh, that's so wild! Like,
Yeah.
what is that?
I feel like and the saying like so and so they do it for the plot. Like they just live like this crazy life. They do what they want. It's on life on their terms, and it's just like he is an aura. He is a vibe. He just does what he wants to do, whether it's racing the Baja 1000, having a pet raccoon, or any other like crazy story. Because he's got a lot of crazy stories. I'm a big fan of that guy.
Yeah, and again, forever hats off to Daniel Blair for throwing that little tidbit out. And because I remember obviously we were all in the group chat, we were like, what is this guy on, you know what I mean? And it's like, what state has he been to recently, and that he's whatever he's on, I want it, right? If it's kombucha, I want it. But since then, man, it's like we really do low-key pull for Mr. Greco whenever we get the opportunity to. So
Yeah, for sure.
no, dude, Supercross is great. I think it's so cool. I guess last thing, anything Supercross related is what are some of the things that you feel Supercross does differently, and maybe it's because it's on a different scale of things. So I understand that. I played D3 football at a small school, and then it's like, okay, you're asking somebody, how does D1 football do different than D3? Like, well, of course, like there's going to be right a difference of tiers, but what are some of the things that Supercross does that maybe differs from all disciplines of racing? From maybe something that NASCAR does, or maybe something that F1 does. Our series, snowcross, circle track, anything else like that. What is it that Supercross does differently that you feel works for it?
I really appreciate you mentioning that, like, we're talking about different divisions here, and with different
100,
divisions
yeah.
there come different resources and different schools of thought, and I think that there are things that other series and other sports can be looking at. I will say that one thing I think that they do really well is they are not trying to position themselves as Formula One or the National Football League or NASCAR, IndyCar, and I think the reason being is like if you're going to model yourself after someone, you're not going to stand out from them. And that's I'm not speaking for Feld or Pro Motocross here, but they are there to create an avenue of their own and lean into their strengths and set themselves apart that way. So one thing I think that they do is going back to that is they're looking what other sports are doing to promote themselves, and that's not just motorsports. That's they're adapting ideas from that. They're not just going to go down an avenue of like, okay, this is what NASCAR is doing, because in reality, I don't even like using the NASCAR example, because I believe that Supercross is in a much healthier place than NASCAR is at this point.
Yeah.
One thing I think that I really like that Supercross does is, just as a marketer and a, someone with a PR background and broadcast background, they have a whole public relations team dedicated to creating opportunities for both the series and athletes. This is a huge investment. Feld Entertainment is a massive organization. But if you're familiar with the Pat McAfee show, Colt Nichols was on there and got like the full 30 minutes, I believe it was, and live to tape. But anyway, that's all happened because you have a full team dedicated to creating these opportunities. The whole opportunity with Hayden Deegan, Brian Deegan, and Haley Deegan out at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that was huge for media exposure. That was made possible by the PR team. They also have one thing that we don't have a lot of in short course off-road that I would love to see more of is editorial media. We have so many great storytellers who are telling stories through video and through photo, and who are working with teams. But in terms of it's hard for us to have a press conference when we don't have 20, 30 media showing up and just eager to grab a mic and ask questions. That is such an important part of getting the story out there. And so I think that there are some media out there, and I'm not going to say we don't have that, because I know that I believe it was Speed Sport. They've done some coverage, and there have been some other networks here and there. And when there's been something big that's happened, I think I've seen stuff on NBC Sports. They'll pick up a story, and sometimes they'll ask, or big news entities will reach out and ask for content so that they can tell the story on their platform. But if resources were an issue, I think that a series should have its own PR team. I think that every team should have a PR team. So, because I think this is a two-way street, I think that the teams could also use a PR person, or even we don't really have in the sport so much. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if CJ and Johnny or Ryan or Keegan or anyone have an agent. But that's one thing when we're talking about different divisions, is the athletes and even the series. I'm sure they work with a marketing agency. I don't know for sure, but I would have to assume. I'm in my lane on broadcast here with Bell. But, there are different departments, different things that come with a big budget that can help just bring a sport to the next level and keep it there, which really excites me, because I learned something today from Carl Shabitsky about what Champ is actively doing, and has brought on an agency to help. And that excites me in many, many ways. So, and sorry, I'm kind of deviating from the original question of what are some things that Supercross and motocross do well. I like how they differentiate themselves. Just to recap what I've said, I like how they differentiate themselves. I like that, they are such a well-established sport that they are able to, negotiate TV contracts. And for example, NBC Sports is largely responsible for bringing Super Motocross and our playoff system to what it is. When you are a sport that's that big and has constantly growing, there are partners who want to get involved and take it to the next level. That is what has been happening, a steady progression with short course. It's not like an overnight thing, but neither has it been with Supercross and motocross. I think that, it's easy to look at Supercross and be like, hey, they're doing all these things super, super well. And the context of it is, they've been at this for a very long time. They've been steady. The ownership hasn't changed hands a ton of times. It has been, there have been some things over the years, but it's been very, very steady. So I think that I'm a big fan of how they differentiate themselves. I love the steadiness of it. And as a result of the two and many other ingredients as well in this recipe, I think the sport has just continued to trend upward, and it's been in a really good place right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's always going to be Supercross, but you still have to evolve, right? You have to adapt, to everything that's going on around you, and they do such a fantastic job of that. You know what I mean? And they really promote their stars, and I think that's where they do a really good job of, or at least, good, how do I say this? I don't want to say good sports. So like, entities like, the NFL or, NHL, MLB, Supercross, where you kind of push your stars, and you're like, hey, to grow. Obviously the Indiana Fever, right, do a fantastic job as far as Caitlin Clark goes, and and it's just, I mean, we could spout off on that because I'm fascinated by her. I think she's awesome. I think she's wonderful. Jeffrey and I were talking about wanting to go to a game, and we were like, oh, maybe we go to Chicago or maybe we go to Minneapolis, but the tickets are like 280. Like it's just something ridiculous. Where I'm like, man, there's a demand there. But I think that's an example of doing it right. As far as pushing the stars go. Obviously with like Jet, Hunter. One of the last Supercrosses that I watched, I think it was, where were they at? Where was before Indy? Oh, Daytona.
Daytona, yeah.
So it was something like that. So I think that was really cool as far as pushing their stars. Tomac, and it's like how can you not? But I think that's a cool bit to do to kind of push your stars. And like you said, at the end of the day, does come down to resources, right? We're talking D1, we're talking D3 here, and both can still be great, but some you got to utilize what you have. So I think that's cool. I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, when you had mentioned, I want to make sure I'm understanding which example you're talking about. So when you talk about Daytona and Tomac, like what did you see specifically that either like Daytona or Supercross was promoting? Just so I understand.
So it was kind of like the little stories of stuff, I guess, like the little vignettes, just kind of catching up with Jet, right? Catching up with like Tomac, and then catching up with like Hunter, because even though they're injured or they're gone, you still get to catch up on them because you still got Tomac fans, you still got Hunter fans, you still have Jet fans that again they love the sport. But hey, man, if they're able to get to catch up on their favorite driver, like that means the world to fans, even if they don't realize it. So I think stuff like that is cool. I think it's great that even though that they are out with injuries, you're still catching up. You're still getting them at the forefront. You're getting them TV time because at the end of the day, they are stars, man. Jet is an absolute incredible talent, and he carries a following with them. And if you're able to utilize that, I mean, hats off to you. I think that's the such a great thing to do.
Absolutely. And I love the example of like, they're all stories are worth telling. Anyone who's going to put all the risk and investment to be able to be a professional athlete or to go racing with Champ Offroad or Snowcross or whatever series on a full-time basis, like those stories are worth recognizing. But you bring up a really intriguing point that Supercross, and I say Daytona and Supercross because for that specific event it is two different entities and we work together, as opposed to any other Supercross race where it's all felt entertainment. What they are doing is leaning into the superstars of the sport because they know that those names sell tickets. They know that it gets people engaged and it gets people talking, and that's like it's a really hard line to walk. I can say on behalf of the years that I was working with series on in terms of marketing and tracks as well, is that's going to sell. At the same time, like those privateer stories are so important, but at what point are you telling too many stories to where it's all getting convoluted and it's not like driving home the goal at the end of the day to put butts in seats to get viewers to tune into the broadcast, you name it. So like I think one thing that's always been a challenge with short course is not enough love to sportsmen is the one thing I see and hear all the time. And I get that. Like short course races are not happening without our sportsmen families and our sportsmen athletes. However, like it's, when it comes to clicks and views and getting people like really drawn in, sometimes you have to pick and choose between, do we use an image in this graphic or in this video of CJ Greaves, one of the greatest of all time. He's an easy example. Or do we spend all these other resources instead to tell all these stories? And you have to pick and choose the time to do these things, because both are important. But like I said, I think it goes back to like there's always the issue of like sportsmen don't get enough representation. Well, we always want to be better about that. As a commentator, I always want to be better about that. I just have to like, I know as a commentator, I have to be selective about when I can do that. If I get time in the broadcast to do it, 1,000% I want to do it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Tito? Like as someone who's been around this for many years, as someone who works in the media, like it's an interesting conversation, and there isn't a simple answer to it.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of dynamics that go into it, right? Is that, I agree. Of course, you always want to give love to sportsman drivers, especially when you start to get to know them or you're around them a little
Mm-hmm.
bit longer.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those, I don't even know if I'm using it right here, but a bit of a catch 22 is that in my experience, some of the sportsman drivers just aren't um, TV inclined, I guess, camera experienced. So like if you go and you ask questions, a lot of the questions are very kind of like yes, no, oh, we had a good truck. Yeah, I pushed myself. And it's very like short, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whereas you go and you ask somebody like, a Johnny Greaves or, a Keegan, a Jimmy Henderson, you're like, hey, like, coming in today, yeah, blah, 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 like what's the game plan? And then he'll come in and talk to you. We may change on this and this, and that, and blah, blah. And he'll give you an answer. Whereas if, you ask some of these sportsman guys like, hey, like, what was the game plan today? Well, I just wanted to go out there and, just do my best and try to win. And that's what we did. It's like, and that's fine. But when we're putting this stuff together, we can't necessarily be putting out, short, quick cuts because then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to edit this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is your edit going to be just short and choppy, and that's how you're going to put it out? So at the same time, you want to give love. It's like you almost have to find those guys that do, kind of give you a little bit more to work with, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that's maybe a little bit of a mindset that I have now that I'm on this side of things. And because I think the thing of it too is you want to hear from, some of these, super stock guys, right? When we did the super stock SST, rush episode, some of them were hard to kind of get out of their shell, right? Like with, even Nick Being was a little bit hard at times. Braden was fine. Joey Wachosik was fine. Aaron Holiday was a little bit tough. Ben Holcher was really difficult to try to, get some words out of. And again, and that's just who they are, right? I get it, totally get it. But there are people out there that are fans. I mean, look at myself, right? I before 2019 still am a huge Nick Bing fan, right? I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed the truck, enjoyed the color. I would love to always hear from him. But sometimes it's just not how it goes, right? So I think that's something that maybe we're going to try to work on too this summer is we have our Impulse Media, or we have our Impulse show, and I think with this Tito time thing, I think trying to kind of getting that opportunity to reach out to guys to kind of get some of that sportsman feel. So like one person I know I'd like to talk to, because we always joke around, is like Taylor Roloff, right? The guy's a character. He's so much fun. The only way I think I would ever bring on Colin or Connor Schultz is if like Chad Rayford was there, right? And they could make fun of Chad Rayford, right? Like if you got a group of friends with you where you can kind of open up and be a little bit more yourself, absolutely. But I understand that there's just not their forte, right? To be able to conversate and kind of be at that level. So at least I guess that's my take on it. Like I said, there's a lot of dynamics at place. I love to hear from sportsmen. Before I started doing this, I'd love to. And I always wondered why. And maybe this is one of those that I start to realize and understand is that as much as you want to hear from it, it's like some of those guys might just give you a 33-second interview, and you're like, all right, like it's tough to work with.
Yeah, and yeah, and I agree. And it's not all sportsmen, and it's not all pros that are like the pro side by side, pro truck. It's not everyone in those divisions, not everyone there is media trained and has
Oh
that
yeah, no.
personality on camera, because I know so many athletes who have a great personality off camera, but as soon as it goes on, there is no amount of like warmth or charisma I can give them as a commentator that
Yeah.
pull it out of them. It's something you have to be comfortable with. Um, and, and I'm glad you bring up the, kind of the how one carries themselves in the public image, whether it be in interviews or in podcasts or just in social media and the media in general. It's one thing that's like, it's a big initiative of mine is I want to lend my skills to help lift others, like, give them the tools to show them like, hey, here's how you can make the most out of your TV time. Um, and I had a point, but again, back to my ADHD brain, I kind of lost it there. Oh, you like, I didn't mean to deviate from your example of, you talked about like Eli Tomac and how even though he's out, his story is still being told because it's something that like brings in fans, it gets people excited. Um, I one thing that Supercross and Super Motocross does as a whole, not just a series, is that I believe that there is a higher percentage of athletes there who have been provided media training. Like that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that is a privilege. Not everyone has access to it, nor the time of day when you're working more than a 9 to 5 job and you're building a race car and it's a 365-day-a-year commitment. Not everyone has that. However, the sport as a whole, and these athletes have agents too. They promote themselves very, very well. So it's very easy for it, between Supercross and Motocross, when they need something for an athlete, be it for local media, be it for a soundbite for the broadcast or what have you. I can say as a commentator, it definitely makes it easier when you have more people at your disposal who can just like give you what you need for the broadcast and for social media, for digital, what have you. So that's one thing, like the sport collectively, not just a serious thing, is what I really want to encourage other people to really focus time on. I realize time's a premium, and like I said, you're building race cars. It's a year-round thing, but I wanna do what I can to give my skills and help people be better in that department, because the rising tide floats all ships. When one person's better in the media, it elevates all other media. We're all learning from that. When one driver is good, it rises the tide for other drivers. And you could say that about just any industry. So I think collectively, there are ways that short course off-road can be better. I don't believe that it is 1000% on the series.
Oh
Like the
yeah.
series
No, I
is
agree.
always going to need to be better. I also want to acknowledge that there are things that as athletes I want to see improve as well, because man, like everyone always says, it's like it's the best goddamn sport. It's so exciting. The personalities in this sport, are you kidding me? Like we have such a gift. So I just want to I'm biased as being a genuine fan, but I just want to see it continue to get better and better. And like I find myself all the time like getting frustrated of, well, why isn't like this? Why can't we be doing this, or why can't they be doing this? And it's like I think our heads are all in the same place if we all just want it to be better.
Yeah, no, I 1,000% agree. And there was a question last night on our podcast. I think CJ asked Matt Gerald or somebody, and it's just Jeffrey and I, we were like man, it was a simple question, but we again start talking about it, again, because at that point it does feel just kind of like a little sesh. We're all just kind
Mm-hmm.
of around chilling, and you think about if you get worked up about it, right? Or, there's a change in your volume about it, or even your energy level, right? Or you're getting like, oh, I'm getting worked up. And what I think is great though, is that there's care there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Is that if there wasn't, then I think that's super concerning, is that if there's no like passion or emotion behind it, then it's like, all right, like, oh, well, I think they should do this. Okay. All right. And then it's just gets thrown to the side. But there are people that do care. Like you said, is somebody, like you, like me, other people, even like, guys in the media. Because if there's no series, there's no us, right? So it's like, why would we want it to go bad? You want it to go great. You want it to thrive, because if they're winning, we're all winning. And like you said, it's the best kept secret, man. Like it's so cool. And I always admitted that too. Like when I went out to college, even in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, talking to others about racing. I'm like, I think this is the best racing, man. I'm like, there's nothing else like it, and it really showcases a lot of skills as far as talents. Obviously, turning left, turning right, jumping, setting up. It's like motocross, but in like a NASCAR truck, style, and you're going at Glen, Glen Watkins or Watkins Glen with jumps, and you only got 10 laps to do it, and it's like an all out sprint, door to door kind of battle stuff. So, I mean, again, obviously love the sport. Always wanted to. We wanted to go in the positive direction. I bought some lottery tickets, so if I win, I know what I'm doing with it.
Hell yeah. No, I love and thank you for asking me the question about what what Supercross is doing and just kind of my thoughts on this, because like I hear time and time again, well, Supercross does something this way, and I get so frustrated. It's all with good intention, I know it, but when people will then speak for Supercross effectively and be like, they're this is so easy for Supercross, like why can't Champ be doing this? Well, I have never once been like, I think you asked me when I first started for Supercross. I was a few weeks into it. You guys cold called me, and I answered. You were asking me some things, and I was so like early into my like Supercross career that like, hey, I'm still trying to process like the run of show each week. Like I'm kind of getting my bearings here. But aside from you guys, like no one has bothered to ask the one person who works for Supercross and motocross, ask like, hey, like how does this work? And I get really bothered by that, because I'm like, otherwise it's too easy to antagonize Champ and by saying why are they not doing this, without like being asked like, hey, like what can, like how do the gears turn, like how exactly is that happening there? And I don't have all the answers, but I love talking about these things. Like for example, Chris Van Den Elzen and Amanda came to Las Vegas, our Super Motocross playoff round, our finalist last year, and it was so much fun having discussions with them and just like brainstorming like how can this happen. I'm like, hey, this is happening right now, like here's how this works. Like there's some there are more pieces than you think. Like some of this stuff can apply to Champ, it can apply to snowcross and stuff like that. So it's like just having more of a discussion about it versus based on just like antagonizing Champ for not doing something. Like I realize like my biases here. I work for Champ, but also like I don't work for them on the marketing side. Like I'm purely a commentator for them. So it's like I want to, like, I don't know. It's just I guess what I'm getting at is like when the name Supercross is brought up in this manner, like I appreciate being asked the question like you asked me today. So thank you.
I'm gonna be honest. I thought you were gonna go in the other direction where you're gonna be like, I get asked it so much, and like people are always want to pick my mind because I'm in Supercross, and it blew my mind that like no one would be like, hey, Haley, like what are some things that are working positively for them that could possibly translate or correlate in this sense, because again, I'm well aware of the different levels and tiers of where Champ is at, where Supercross is at. We're talking American outlets and outlets in London. You know what I mean? Yeah, they both put out electricity, but it's a difference. You know what I mean? There's different things that you got to do and adjust for and account for. So no, I think that's that's wild to me, because I mean that would have been obviously, like you said, you were a few weeks in and we were already like, hey, what's catering like? You're, like, hey, like, whatever it is. And no, I think that's fascinating. And again, I always try to remind people like to obviously have that mindset, that there are different series, different levels, and not one thing is going to translate from one to the other. But there are some ideas, strategies, or whatever that potentially could, and and on a smaller scale could help. So I think that's great. You are a basket of knowledge that I think needs to be utilized. And there's a difference between utilized and overutilized. So, I obviously, super gracious. I mean, I remember Jeffrey and Lyle and I kind of joking about this. We're like, man, better enjoy her while we got her. Like
Oh,
she be off to bigger and better things. You know, we make the joke about Lyle too, man. We're like, man, it's cool while we got him, but
oh.
you know, again, man, you guys are just great talent. Again, like everything that we put together for Rush was so great, and you adding to it definitely. Because we talked about it, we're like, man, like, do you think it would have been like as good of a story thing? We're like, well, you sure you got the visuals, but you need that like cohesive, or that adhesive to hold it together. And yeah, man, I mean, knocked out of the park. We did mention like we were like, if we ever decided to do Rush 3 without funding, we're like, that would probably be our swan song, right? It was some dark days when we said that. So, but we'd love to do it. We'd love to come back and do it. So, I think this would be like an unofficial offer. I'm sure the guys would be behind me. But if we ever decided to come back and do Rush 3, and let's say you are, commentating the Super Bowl, would you know, be gracious enough to bless us with your presence and, help with the storytelling of it?
Absolutely. I would be honored. I love it. I love working with you guys, and it's like the only point at which I feel really bad and like you're getting the short end of the stick is like at the end of the race weekend when my brain is fried
Oh
and
yeah.
I have a long drive and like tear down to go, and I'm trying to like regurgitate like my thoughts on what happened in the weekend. I feel like I probably made you guys create like a ransom note of an edit because I'm just having to stop all the time and I don't feel like I'm giving you coherent thoughts. But so I want to clean that up. Let me just state that for the record. But I would love to be a part of it. You guys do such great work, and I like where your mind's at. I like not just obviously like we could talk all day about like Rush and what you guys are doing and how incredible it has been and continues to be, but just general like human to human in this conversation. I like where your head's at, and I appreciate the dialogue on it because like for me and in my career path, like if it's all about the ask. You never know what you're going to learn if you just give someone the floor. And I'm in this career path because I love learning. And so like when there's discussion and like when I don't know something, like I want to go and ask someone, when there is discussion, I feel like that's when things can move forward in a positive way. I feel like when it's easy to go down this path of like it's after a frustrating day, right? It's easy for me to be like, oh man, today sucked. Why couldn't it have been like this? And just be in a negative headspace about it. But like when there's positivity, when there's dialogue, when there's collaboration, and I think that's the biggest one. I think it can only mean good things. So I'm excited about what this year has in store, and I'm excited to work with you guys again.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head, man. Is when it's there's positivity, when there's collaboration, when you're getting minds to kind of be on the same, no pun intended, but on the same track.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can only go in the right direction because when you band together and you're all behind the same bit, like you just can't deny, right? You just can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
And when everyone's wanting this, wanting that, getting pulled, eight different ways, there's no answer there. But if there's a solidarity on where to go, then it's like, hey, let's go ahead and send it. I think we're obviously nearing in on about an hour and a half here. Kind of one of the last bits I want to go ahead and talk about again, is Champ Offroad. Obviously, you're commentating on it. We love to be a part of it. We're always trying to contribute the best way that we can. And us being in the sport longer, getting to know more people. We've obviously from the start, and then even me getting to meet you, and obviously we respect the hell out of you, and we always take what you say into consideration. We always your word does mean a lot. So and we're not saying like that we don't take other people's words into consideration, but other people, can be like, oh, what about this? And we're like, yeah, but someone like you who's kind of helped us out and proven, that you are, just the highest of assets. Like we're always gonna, make sure that, that we have, your back, and then we have discussions like this. So it's like, some things, at least with what I'm doing now with this like mic and kind of everything, I do try to take some of what you do and apply it to me. Because again, like I know I said this even beforehand. I'm like, Haley's one of those. She is very good at what she does. She does her homework. She's game face. You know what I mean? You got that notepad in front of you, or you've got that tablet or whatever it may be. She's on it. So I think it would only be right for me to, at least have something, right? Like whether it's a notes app or whatever it may be. So, I am at least watching some of the stuff that you do, and I always try to then, apply it to whatever I do. So, yeah, at least got somebody watching, you know what I mean? The stuff that you do, and, you're my Brett Favre right now, and I'm trying to emulate, or Aaron Rodgers or whatever it may be. But, I'm trying to, do it the right way. So, and I feel like, and I don't want to toot my own horn here, but from where we started to where we're at now, I try to emulate, or, try to be a little bit more professional. I've seen the way that you conduct yourself. And as much as I do like to, say wild stuff, there does have to be a level of, little bit of professionalism there. And, so I think it's great. I think it's great dialogue. With this season, we are going places. We are going outside of Wisconsin. We're going outside of Minnesota. We're going outside of Michigan, not only to Missouri, but also to California. So for you, what are your kind of your thoughts and feelings on it? Because, it's been a hot topic, and I don't know if you've, gotten some of the lowdown in the off-road world, because, you are immersed in that, that Supercross world. But, some people aren't, in favor of, going out west. Some people are, it's kind of split. It's just a weird time. At the end of the day, our biggest thing that we say is, hey, what's done is done. You got to work towards it. You got to work towards the positivities of it. People are, stoked for Wheatland, but then that last race, people are, not celebrating for. So, for someone like you in your position, I guess where you're at, what are your thoughts on the 2025 season, and what's to happen, I guess?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that, like, anyone who's voiced an opinion as a driver of not wanting to travel cross country, or make schedule plans accordingly, like I can understand it. I don't have to agree or disagree with it, because at the end of the day, like, I don't field a race team, like I don't have that kind of expense. And I realize that sponsor planning for some brands, it takes like very long ways in advance before a season even starts. So I can understand that. What I will say, as far as my opinion goes, big picture, I think this is really good. I think that Glen Helen in California, this is a known and proven market. Look at how successful Lucas Oil Offroad was before it went away. There is still a devout fan base out there. There are still very many talented drivers out there, and former drivers who are still diehard fans of this. So to give back to those fans and give back to this community that really has been a staple to short course racing for a very long time, I think this is really special. Not only special for that reason, but because it's expanding the footprint of Champ Off-Road and everyone involved with it, all of the racers, all of the brands, our TV network, and it's just it's good for the sport, in my opinion. I think Wheatland is great. I think this one is a classic example of, you don't have someone running the show who's just not listening to the feedback of the community. To my understanding, I don't want to speak for Carl and JD and Long Haul Productions. This is a conversation, I believe, with Wheatland. They've actually been speaking about racing there prior to this season. Like, I could be wrong, but I want to say, like, this has been a conversation for some time. I'm glad it's finally coming to fruition, because we all know what Wheatland is and what it's capable of, in terms of just being a marquee event in the racing that it's produced. So I am very, very excited about that. Unfortunately, I am heartbroken to say I have to miss that one. I'm on contract for Supercross that weekend because we conflict with Denver, I believe it is. So I'm
Oh,
really
okay.
bummed. But I'm really glad to see, you know, of course, all the staples in the Midwest with ERX, Bark River, Crandon, Anago, Dirt City. Like you're taking care of the gems who have taken care of this series for many years, or for the years since it started, and even predating Champ Offroad. So I like this. To me, I'll speak to Glen Helen, in Wheatland as well too. These are not new markets. These are areas where there is an existing fan base and infrastructure. To me, these are far less riskier than going to a place like Mid America Outdoors, where nobody showed up for it. It
Yeah.
was kind of a flop of an event. There was a lot of promise there and a lot that just didn't happen. So to me, like, and we all know how excited everyone was for Mid America Outdoors. So, like, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future, but I do know what is the groundwork is, and that these are already established markets. And for that, um, you know, I'm not the one making the business decisions, but if I was, I'd be looking at these like, okay, there is at least a little bit of a guarantee that this is going to be good for the footprint, good for viewership, and hopefully, and I would assume like there's a little bit of promise there, good for fans, because we want fans to have the full sensory experience of being there. So, you know, in summation, I'm excited about this. I, of course, would love to see a field just as full of race cars, trucks, buggies that we do in the Midwest. I realize that that may not happen, at least maybe not this first year. Who knows? But that's how I feel about this from a series perspective, in my opinion only.
Yeah, and next week, as of right now, for for Tito time, I text RJ Anderson.
Uh-huh.
So RJ will be on next week. You know, we'll get the full breakdown details. You know, of his thoughts going out west. You know, who plans on being there, or maybe I can, you know, reach out to him beforehand, and be like, hey, can you be able to gauge, like, you know, for Glen Helen, how many people are going to be there, or any West Coast guys, you know, that share some interest. So we'll get kind of a West Coast mindset, you know, for out there. And you know, it's funny, when we were on the podcast last night, we are talking about like West Coast drivers, and you know, how some of them transitioned to desert. And I was like, you know, we just got to talk shit. Like, you just got to be like, hey man, like, you know, Menzies washed up, you know, McCachran washed up, Brock Hager on one, RJ Anderson washed up. Like, yeah, you just, you know, kind of, you gotta tap into that competitive side. You know what I mean, of
Yeah.
some of those drivers. So it's like, hey, you know, Bonacci, you know, we know you ran away this year, so we'll give you one shot at Glen Helen. So no, and I guess that just kind of sparking a few. I got a few more questions here for you, but do you do you enjoy um, being in the position that you're in, and getting to know that, man, some of these people are just good people. Like, it's so, like a Bonacci, right? We got an opportunity to meet him. He was kind of a, you know, 1 year guy for Champ, but to meet him, you know, be friends, I got him on Snapchat. And it's one of those where you meet these people and you're like, man, these are good people, and I enjoy it. And then sometimes you find yourself cheering for them, and it's definitely a blessing, you know,
Yeah.
to meet people like that. So I guess, you know, being in your position, you know, have you ever felt that way, or do you feel that way each time you transition from like different disciplines of racing?
Yeah, I'll first start out with Champ and in the community, and not just drivers, but you know, crew members, people who work at the tracks, just everyone in the community. Like, it is truly so good. And if it wasn't that good, if it was an icky or toxic environment, I would have hit the road a few years ago. It really is good. And like, even, you know, I feel out the vibe before we go live with a podium, or even before I approach someone in the pits and we're kind of chit chatting. I'm kind of like getting a feel for things before I ask, hey, can we do an interview about this? I'm seeing what the vibe is. And like, there are situations where it's like I can differentiate between someone who's had a bad day. They just, you know, rolled their truck. They're not in a good place, even though we have an obligation to like get this story for the fans. I feel out the situation. And even in the toughest times, I don't know And if I have, it's been less than 5 times that someone has ever like told me no, like because everyone here like understands that we're all here to do a job. There's a respect
Yeah.
there, but also like everyone is just everyone's just so cool and laid back. So even in those moments where I realize that a driver or a crew guy or crewwoman may be having a tough time, like they're still like on a human level, like just chill enough to be like, hey, like I just you know maybe maybe not now. There's not like when it comes to drivers as well, like no one has really given me a hard time in terms of like made me feel uncomfortable or said something insulting. Like it's been nothing but a good vibe and a good community. And I like anywhere you go, you're gonna come across bad people or less than savory personalities that you're just like, ooh, maybe I should just be careful around that person. I don't want to get too close, or they might not be so kind. Like it's such a rarity in
Yeah.
off road. Like it really is such a good community. And I'm very fortunate for that. So yeah, we have a good thing going here. But when transitioning to other sports too, like yeah, I know like I'll mention Supercross because I think a lot of our audience is also paying attention to that sport. Like you know what you're going to get from certain racers. Like I know Cooper Webb on any given day, he's just going to shoot straight with me. It might be a little spicy. I know it's not personal, but I know it's like that's what we could get from him. But even still, like Cooper Webb can be a very difficult interview in terms of that, but still very good people everywhere you turn left and right. And like I said, if I'm in a working environment that's not so good feeling, I probably won't be there. I make decisions based on where I want to be and what I want to do and the people I want to surround myself with. So I love it. I love the motorsports community.
I you know, I agree. I mean, they're just, you know, people that you meet that you're like, maybe you got wrong. You know what I mean? Just kind of initially, right? I mean, well known is obviously me and CJ, right? Growing up, um, I just was not the biggest fan, right, of him. I mean, first of all, dude's winning everything, right? You're like, all right, like we need someone else up there, right? Like, and that's kind of how I feel about Jet. We're like, all right, it's not that I don't like him; it's just I don't like that he's winning all the time, right? It's kind of whatever. So, and then when he battled Keegan, and Keegan always said he was good with him, and then we did Rush, and then I got the opportunity to interview him and meet with him, and actually really ask him any and every question I've ever wanted. And I'd phrase it a little differently, right? I wasn't like, hey, like, why were you a douche? I was kind of like, hey, there's a lot of talking with Ricky Johnson and some spiciness there. How were you able to kind of transition out of that, or are you still in that phase of your life? And no, he answered it really great, really graciously. And I've gotten to know him, and I was like, first person to always admit, hey, I was wrong about that. And something we always tell these drivers too is like, you can tell us no. Like if you don't want us there, then we won't be there. We'll always try to capture some like raw reaction moments, but if you tell us no, like please, we will never try to make you look dumb. Like you're a client, right? This is what we got to do. Because if you look bad, we look bad, and that's not the goal there. I think I've only been told no twice, maybe. One I think it was by Corey. Corey had something going on, Corey Winter, and they had to get the truck done, so I didn't go with that. And then Johnny G, Fall Crandon. So I was covering for Mav TV because they weren't there yet, and they were like film anything and everything. I was like, okay. And Johnny had a bad practice, and I think he like put it in the berm or something like that. And I was just like, hey, and I think he had to change something out. And I just asked him, I was like, hey, do you have a quick 30 seconds? Dude, he looked at it, shot me darts, and he was like, no, not right now. And I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm gonna go take a walk. I'm like, gotta take a step out of here. Like if he's, obviously it's not nothing personal, but, if I, ask him to do an interview and he's last thing on his mind, then it's like, all right, I'm gonna out of sight, out of mind, right? Then it's like if the camera guy's out of here, then he can focus on the truck. But if the camera guy's at the corner of his eye all the time, you kind of maybe get a little anxious. And it's like, I don't want to do that to him. I don't want to do that to any driver. So
Yeah.
That's always something unique. Um, so I want to move to just two more questions that I have that, whenever I try to ask questions, I'm like, okay, what's the fan in me want to know? What do I like to think that, I have a good tune in with some fans. And, some people obviously have questions that, I wouldn't think of or whatever it may be. I always try to have a good consensus of what it means to be a fan and of the sport, what I'd like to know. And then, from you, from other drivers. But now these are these are probably two personal questions that I want to know. Justin Barsha. I mean, like I said, that's my boy, man. I love me some Bam Bam.
Mhm.
Shoot him straight, Haley. Is he cool or is he one of those like you don't meet your idols kind of thing?
No, he's exactly who you think he is. He gives you exactly he gives me the exact same personality that he gives you through the camera lens. Like he is awesome. He's someone who I can just strike up a conversation with. Like this last weekend before Indianapolis, he's at press day. I'm always working press, and so he'll. I didn't have a camera around me, so I wasn't like in a position to shoot an interview. But I'm like, you know what? He's someone I know who I can just like strike up a conversation with. So we were just talking about his off weekend, and he and Amber, his wife, just welcomed their second baby. So he's super cool, and like any like little like punchiness, any like humor that you'll see from him in interviews, I get that off camera as well. It's very genuine, and I realize that I'm media. And to an extent, I'm sure that there are athletes out there who are still careful about what they say around media and the impression they give off. But when someone's impression is so consistent time after time, I read that as genuine. And so he's been such a joy to work with, and he's always a fun one to chit chat with.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's so good to hear. That's so good to hear. Yeah, yeah, when we were at Indy, I don't know, man. I think we got out to the pit area a little too late, and we saw the line. I was like, "There's no shot that I'd even be able to
Uh,
be in that line by the time that he was done." And then he wasn't there for motocross for Ironman. He had his
yeah.
bike there, but he wasn't there. So it's like, all right, well, maybe one of these times. But I know at some point, I'm gonna meet him. I'm gonna get his autograph. Like I said, I'm a big fan. Last question I have is, you've made the transition from Minnesota to Indiana. And in knowing you, it's like, I know that you're from Minnesota, but you're very, and maybe I'm wrong here, but, you seem very prideful about, you know, living in Indiana right now. Cause like you said, hey, man, motorsport capital of the world, man, you got a lot of stuff there. For you, and gun to your head, which do you think has your heart? I guess is Minnesota or Indiana? Because I feel that if I lived in something like Indiana or another state that really called home to me as far as like my job and my passions and stuff, it'd be hard and difficult to try to pick. But me living in Minnesota and Wisconsin, like it's always gonna be Wisconsin for me, right? Because there's just that
Mhm.
little rivalry. But for you, hockey gal, lacrosse, Supercross, Indiana. What's got the edge?
Ooh, this is tough because Minnesota will always be home to me, and that's like where my family is, and they'll always be special. Um, I'm not too tied down to one city. Like we lived in Vegas for a while. We lived in Iowa. I lived in South Dakota. We lived in South Dakota for a few years, and that's where I graduated college. So it's like it's home. This is cliche. Like home is where you make it, and like it's for me. Like for me and my husband right now, it's like where can we live that like is it makes our lives easier in terms of like I travel for it. He works from home. But like where can I be that's just a banging airport, that's a nice city, it just allows me to do the things that I want to do in my life. Right now it's here. We moved here a few years ago for work, and um, that's not in the picture anymore, the specific reason why we came here, but we just stayed because we liked it, but not too tied down. And if it we have a home and businesses here, but really like we're not too locked down. So like, if I had to choose one or the other, I don't know. To be honest, like there are other places around the country and around the world that I would love to live. I would love to go live internationally at some point. Maybe when I'm off the road and done like touring and being on the road full time for work. My career takes a different path. Like I would love to explore that option. So, uh, yeah, I'm enjoying Indy right now, but I never forget what I came from. Like I definitely consider myself a Minnesotan, and when I'm asked about my hometown, like I'll always say like Minnesota. Like if if I was a driver, like on the entry list, like I'm almost like it feels weird listing Indianapolis because it just doesn't feel like I don't have roots here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I can't say that Minneapolis is the best, but that's home. But like I said, it's where you make it.
Um, so I'm famously notorious for this. I always say last question, but there's always one more question that pops in my mind, and I
I do
can't help
too.
but ask. I can't help but ask.
Mhm.
Minnesota, how did you get rid of the accent?
It's honestly like I never like grew up with a very thick accent. Yes, there are things that I will say when it will come out, but I've always been conscious of it. And also like over the years, like after I graduated college, I've always worked with a coach, whether it be a broadcast coach, a performance coach, a linguistic coach, someone to help me through these things. And like one I've known from a very very early on in this career that what makes a good broadcaster is not having a regional accent.
Yeah.
Giving yourself as much neutrality as possible will serve you very, very well. And that's not to say someone without a southern drawl or a Canadian accent or, any other accent from around the world. That is certainly not to say that you can't be successful. But in terms of like wanting to diversify and where you go with your career and try different, whether it's local news or sports or what have you, it at least at the time when I learned this, and given this information may be honestly outdated, so I hope I'm not offending anyone. But if you can neutralize your accent as best as possible, it's gonna help you in the field. So yeah, I don't think I ever really really had a thick one, but I mean it varies so much. Like in my hometown, there are people who I went to school with who have the thickest.
Oh man.
You think that it's Fargo, such a thick accent. And there are people who and I grew up with those people. I don't have that. And there are people in Indiana. Like this is such a strange place because like you go like Indianapolis on south, and there is a very thick drawl. It is like they have in Southern Illinois. Like we're bordering Kentucky and like Middle
Yeah.
America. So you like in Ohio too. Ohio like people think that, like when I say that Aaron Plessinger isn't a cowboy and he makes up his accent. No, he doesn't. Like you've been to Ohio, you hear that accent.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's just like such a fine line because there are plenty of people from like central, even northern Indiana who just don't have one. So it's a funny deal. But no, I've always been aware of it and tried and have just trained myself to not have that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, then that makes sense. Yeah. When in college, I went to college for hospitality management. So idea was to be working in hotels, right? If I was going to be at the front desk or any sort of hospitality field, I was like, yeah, I can't be going out there with a native accent, right? I can't, be like, hey, what you doing? You trying to check in? Like I can't, you can't greet people like that. So I took a class. I took a speech class in college, and one of our first like exams or tests or whatever was enunciating our name correctly.
Huh.
And he would like meet with us like class where he just like, okay, we'd sit around, he'd walk up and he's like, all right, enunciate your name, and until you said it right you couldn't leave. So it
Oh.
is like kind of like a waterfall thing. So if somebody just wasn't doing it right, like obviously there's frustrations, right? And then if you're three guys away, you're like, man, like this is going to be a bummer. But then it also puts pressure on you to say your name correctly. So
Yeah.
that's one of
Oh, that's
those where
interesting.
I focused on getting rid of not only the native accent, but also kind of that Wisconsin accent. And,
Yeah.
obviously when you're out having a good time or drinking or, whatever it may be, sure, you let it loose, right? And sometimes when you say two, it's like two and, you elongate your vowels a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
no, when I'm on this, I always try to like I said, try to have this, normal neutral voice, like you said. So
Yeah, and this also reminds me too of like in college. So I speak French, and I've like studied throughout college. I was taking French courses, and I'd study in high school and middle school and stuff. And I remember specifically in college, it was 2 semesters of it. I had the meanest, strictest Russian lady for a French professor, and she would insist that. And she broke me of any bad habits in my French, and it was like, if you are not going to put in the effort of learning how to pronounce like the R correctly in French or what have you, you're Americanizing it, and that's not good. Like, why would you like try to like? It's disrespectful, and like to me, that really changed how I think about like, and not to say like having an accent is
yeah,
disrespectful, but I mean like in terms of, and I think her intention was to break us of our bad habits. So like there was a right way, which was the like European Parisian French way, and there was a wrong way. Now, as I'm an adult and as I've gotten to go work in Quebec, and I'm like learning to understand the Canadian French accent versus the Parisian French accent, it doesn't make it wrong. So let me preface that by saying what my professor had said about like this is the wrong way to do it. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that like her diligence in like pointing that out to us, in terms of being a professor, it really made me even more hyper aware of when I haven't when my like Minnesota accent would come through, or if I wasn't like in French, like pronouncing this with the correct accent. So it's like it's that will always stand out to my head, and not just for French, but in English as well.
I love meeting Canadians who have been to Quebec and like Montreal, stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
then I love making fun of French Canadians because they can be a little high on themselves at times. So like whenever I'm like "Eh, Quebec, and then like dude, they'll get the biggest kick out of it. And I'm like Je m'appelle Tito. I'm like, am I saying it right? Am I doing it right? And it's just, dude, it's the funnest, man, is when you get some of them Canadians that have been there but aren't like a part of that French Canadian culture. So,
Yeah.
no, I think it's great. I mean, I spoke Spanish, or took Spanish high school and college. Been to Costa Rica, Mexico, Spain. Man, it's definitely. If I said if I were to commit any crimes, I'm going to Costa Rica. Like if for some reason I got to flee the states, I'm going to Costa Rica, man. It's such a great spot to be in. So,
Yes,
um,
love Costa Rica, and that is the same. And I'm not going on the record to say if I commit a crime, I'm going to Quebec or I'm going to France, but I really like it there.
yeah, do I, and we could go on, I'm sure, for another half hour with us in our trip to London and us going to
Hmm.
France, us being in Paris. So
Yeah.
that was a lot. That was actually really cool. I don't know if I want to ask you how to say exit because we say it our own way and we
Huh?
say it very Americanized. That I know that it's not the right way to say it, but we say it anyway because it's funny and it's something that we have now. It's me,
Hmm.
Jeffrey, Lyle, CJ. That when we got off the train, there was exit, and we're like, oh, this is what exit means, and we say sortie. So because
Sorti.
yeah, and we're like, oh, sortie, and like we're like, oh, this is where the exit is. So
That's
yeah.
funny. That's actually a word like my husband picked up when we were in Canada. We're actually going there this weekend. That's one word he picked up when we were up there. He's like sorties. Where are the sorties at? Les sorties.
Yeah, yes, yes. Oh man, so no, it's great, man. Hey, we're closing in on 2 hours. This you might have, I don't know. I'd have to check the Ryan Beat one, but I remember when we started doing this, Jeffrey and I was like, hey, like I'd like to try to keep it to hour 15, maybe an hour and a half, but Jeffrey's always been in that boat of, however long it goes, man, as long as it's flowing, as long as it's good, just roll with it. So, we're closing in on 2 hours here. I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know, extremely busy schedule. Like you said, you got your off week. You're going on vacation tomorrow, so for you to take 2 hours, out of the middle of the week, for us, I think is so great. So, we're gracious for it. Thank you so much. We appreciate your opinions, your mindsets. I think a lot of other people do as well. You are a staple as far as Champ Off Road goes and short course, even into Supercross. So, we are definitely thankful for you today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I love our friendship. I appreciate you guys so much. I love this community. So I mean, we covered a lot of ground today, but like you said, there's so much more we can talk about. So maybe part two one of these days, but I appreciate the time. And I just found out this morning that I am back for champ. I never want to assume. Carl called me this morning and was like, Haley, you in? I didn't want to assume. And I'm like, I didn't want to assume either. Thank you. I'm in. So I can't wait for, like I said, I have to miss Wheatland, but I will be at Inigo. I think it's the next one and for the rest of the season. So I can't wait.
Maybe what we do is we'll get you on the Impulse show so you get all of us. Then it's like me, Jeffrey, Lyle. And I think what we would do is something similar to this is where we'd have you on this on the studio here. We'd use the camera so we can see you, you can see us, and we'll be able to showcase it that way. So it's something that I think we're going to try to do and do with the Impulse show going forward. But hey, like I said, I think part two we'll cover a lot of ground. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that Jeffrey and Lyle want to ask. By the time I think when it rolls around, I'm sure we're going to do it in May, June. The Supercross season. I'm sure we're going to want answers. You know what I mean? A lot of questions. We're going to see how things play out. So, again, thank you so much, everyone else out there. That's listening, that's watching. That stayed with us this long. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. Please like, share, subscribe. We still have merch that we're pushing out as well. New hoodies. They're just as long as our independent style ones. Half an inch shorter, but they're softer. More relaxed, more baggy. You got beanies, you got hats, you got shirts. We got it all. Whatever you guys need, we're there for you. So again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Haley. And this has been Tito time. Thank you all for tuning in.